For our 10:30 session, this is the first of your leadership development workshops that will happen as part of your Internship 1 course. We invite leaders to come in and to talk to you about developing topics that will help you in your career, but also help you in your soul. Today is one of those. Today's the day we're going to talk about what human trafficking looks like. We're going to talk about AI and how we're combating trafficking, using it for the good. We're going to talk about some ways that you can become involved. I know our class is from 10:30 to 11:45. Afterwards, we're going to host a red sand project outside at the fountain. Please, no rain. Hopefully, we'll stop drizzling, right? And then you all can join us for that, please. And then if you've registered, we have a lunch in the student lounge at 12:30. We'll also end at 1:30 with a session by the amazing Jan Edwards from Paving the Way Foundation to talk about keeping kids safe. You are invited to all of them. Even though you only have to attend this session, we invite you to attend the whole day session. I'd like to start out with a small story of how we got started. Because you think, why are we talking about human trafficking in the hospitality industry? Why do we talk about this when we have, the most magical place on earth? And it is Orlando, right? The most magical place. But also what happens is there's a lot of when you have a lot of tourism, you have a lot of activity, sometimes it invites bad actors. So in 2019, we invited Tomas and his team to come in and talk to students about what trafficking looked like specific to the hospitality and tourism industry. We asked them to talk to the students about what grooming tactics to look for, what traffickers might do online to entice a college student. Tomas's team came here in this auditorium for a 1-hour presentation. 200 students showed up. At the end of the presentation, I asked them, how many of you, sorry, I like to walk like Chris Rock. I said, how many of you think you might have witnessed trafficking in your workplace? 30 hands went up. One student at the end, one female student came to me and she said, Dr. Wiki, I think I'm about to be trafficked. My boyfriend is doing these grooming behaviors to me. That was a shock in my soul. These are my kids in my house. We must do something to educate. She was indeed about to be trafficked. We were able to get her away from that person who was manipulating her online. So that took us on a journey of education. You all in this room are the future general managers of hotels and motels, the future leaders of the transportation industry, events, entertainment, restaurants, spa and wellness, sporting. We will teach you to be able to identify and report trafficking so that you won't let it happen under your watch. You will train your teams to identify and report trafficking, and then you will take that and become our army of abolitionists. Sound good? Absolutely. So today we're welcoming a panel of experts that are going to talk to you about trafficking. Please feel free. If you have a question, I want you to raise your hand real high. I'll come around with the microphone. You'll stand up, introduce yourself, and ask your question. Okay? Today is really about learning. It's going to be a hard topic, you guys. It's hard to talk about these things. But I want you to listen openly. I want you to learn, take away something, and then I want you to go tell a friend about it. Tell a family member. Because all of us together, we can stop trafficking if we all do it together, little by little by little. We can't do everything individually, but as an army of abolitionists, we can make a difference. One workshop, 1 hour, we saved one student. Imagine you tell somebody, we can save other people. So are you guys ready to save some people? Yes, all right, okay. That was my Chris Rock pep talk, okay. All right, I have the honor now of welcoming Shauna Hoffman, who's president of Guardrail Technologies. If it's okay, I'd like to read your bio. So Ms. Hoffman is an accomplished leader and expert in artificial intelligence, AI, and blockchain with a career spanning both industry and government. She has held senior roles including chief technology, leader of legal strategy, and operations at Dell Technologies. She's co-leader of the Global Watson AI legal practice at IBM. Oh. Ah. She has been a sought after speaker at prestigious events such as Blockchain for Impact at the UN and the UN Data Forum. Fun fact, when I called her 2 weeks ago to have a meeting, she's like, I can't meet right now. I'm in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I said, oh my gosh, she gets around. So, yeah. She's a recognized authority in her field and has co-authored a paper featured in the Congressional Record and holds patents in data analysis and home network configuration. A Harvard graduate. Woo! Give it up, a Harvard graduate! She's dedicated to giving back to her community in Orlando, where she co-founded and serves on the board of directors for the Community Hope Center, which assists over 45,000 homeless individuals. Let's welcome Shauna Hoffman.
You are so inspiring. Thank you so much for having me today. And I, like so many of you probably sitting here today, I had no idea that trafficking was happening at my doorstep. When we first had founded the Hope Center, about a year into it, I was helping a woman who was looking for clothing for her children, so we were going through clothing, and she just broke down crying. And she explains to me this story that was unbelievable to me, where someone had brought her to the United States from Jamaica, her and her kids, and then this gentleman, would force her to go into a room with just a mattress and take her kids and force her to perform things that she found despicable, but she did them because she said, he has the rights to do that. He told me he did. And I said, that is illegal. So he's taking your children from you. He's forcing you to do these things. That's human trafficking. She had no idea. So this amazing woman today, after we called Tomas, because that was the first call, I said, well, what do I do about this? They said, call Tomas. So Tomas came in. She has a home, a family, and is thriving today. But it's just because someone reminded her, this is not okay. This is not how we live in the United States and really globally. I have had the wonderful opportunity to work with the United Nations, and I just got back from Saudi Arabia, also took a trip to Morocco and other Africa and Asia nations, and learning more about how they're responding. They're as mortified as we are here. But we have something that we can jump on now to fix many of the issues that we foresee in the future. So most of the trafficking, even overseas, is all happening through the internet, right? It's kind of this predator that the predators are using. We have a new predator on our doorstep. That is artificial intelligence. We have seen children, even in Tallahassee, where the young man was coerced by a bot to commit suicide to be with the bot forever. And so we have these AI systems that can easily be used for good and for bad. Honestly, today, most of it is the negative we've been hearing. So we're going to hear a little more about the positive today and how we can combat it as others. So I've got an amazing panelists today. So I'd love to go through each of their bios a little bit so you can get to know who they are. They are experts in the area, people that I have been on stage with before, and feel very fortunate to have them at our, here sharing with you. So Dr. David Metcalf is here on the second, and he's a leading expert in innovation and human performance improvement with over 25 years experience of web-based and mobile technologies for learning and healthcare. As a director of the Mixed Emerging Technology Integration Lab at UCF's Institution for Simulation and Training, he has developed cutting-edge mHealth solutions, simulations, AR tools for organizations like Google, Johnson & Johnson, the VA, and the U.S. military. We are so thrilled to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. And we have Dr. Doug Gilmer. With 35 years of experience in law enforcement, military service, executive leadership, Dr. Gilmer has recently served as Senior Law Enforcement Liaison Advisor at Homeland Security Investigations. He actually just retired and is now out doing goodness in the world. He specializes in human rights, human trafficking, immigration, and national security. We have Kim Figueroa, who you heard from a little bit ago, who's going to share more for you about what she has seen at being at the front line. So Kim is a survivor and advocate dedicated to ending human trafficking and supporting at-risk youth. Overcoming her own past of abuse, foster care, and exploitation, she now works full-time as a survivor mentor with More to Life and Voices for Florida, mentoring and educating youth aged 10 to 24, and I'm so excited to have you hear from her. And we have Michael Eakins. Mike is a creative lead of the Mixed Emerging Technology Integration Lab and Institution for Simulation and Training. He has 9+ years of experience in the field of 3D modeling. I've seen his stuff in person. Insane. It's the coolest stuff. If you get an opportunity to see anything that you guys have built in your labs, it's pretty awesome. I mean, just have to say, I saw a glove that I put it on and I actually felt like I'm touching things in another room. It was beyond belief. So 3D modeling, animation for simulation and gaming. We are thrilled also to have Alan with us today. So Alan Wilkett is a corporal and recently retired, is a decorated law enforcement professional with over 25 years experience, including nearly 15 with the Pasco Sheriff's Office. And he specializes in crime prevention and was honored at the 2007 Law Enforcement Deputy of the Year and 2017 Florida Human Trafficking Law Enforcement Official of the Year. So thank you so much for being with us today. So, Doug, I'd love to start with you. And you've recently retired from a position that you have seen the good, the bad, the ugly of human trafficking. So I'd love to have you share just some of your experience with everyone here.
So let me begin by asking, how many of you drove here today? Or rode in a vehicle? How many of you would agree that riding here today in a vehicle was better than walking? Right? We would agree that probably automobiles have made life easier. Correct? How many of you right now have a cell phone? Everybody. How many of you would agree that that phone has probably made life easier for you in some aspects, even if it's just your social life, your personal life, right? That it's probably better than the telegraph? Or a party line? I mean, when I grew up, I mean, our phone, some of you, maybe Alan will remember that you got a phone with like the longest cord you could possibly get because the phone was connected to the wall. That's right. You could only go so far. And then we got wireless phones that you could still use in the house, but they didn't have a very effective range. And then we got cell phones. They've changed the way that we do life. They've made us much more interconnected. Not a bad thing. We just saw on the news yesterday a $500 billion AI investment coming to the United States. It's a big deal. But we can't forget the human factor. So I'm, in addition to the things that I've done in my law enforcement career, I'm also a bit of a researcher and a historian, and I've done a lot of research on the history of human trafficking in the United States, post-Civil War to present. How many of you knew that the earliest textbooks on human trafficking were written in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s? Of course, Jan Edwards does, because she's heard me talk about it before. We've had textbooks on this issue for 120 plus years. I've been fortunate enough to collect some of those books, some of those first editions, and I've read them. Do you know that 120 years ago, those textbooks were talking about grooming and grooming behaviors? The tactics traffickers use to lure people into being exploited. Guess what? Nothing's changed. The same tactics traffickers used 120 years ago, as outlined in these books, are the same tactics they use today. They prey on vulnerabilities of people. Not technology, people. They prey on their socioeconomic status. They prey on their immigration status. They prey on their familial status in order to exploit people to do the things that they want them to do. The only thing that has changed in 120 years is technology, is the internet. And it's been a gradual progression because we didn't always have the internet, but before there was the internet, there was the advent of the automobile. The automobile forever changed the landscape of human trafficking in the United States. And then there was the telephone. Vehicles were more widespread than telephones for many years. But the telephone changed the landscape of human trafficking. And then we had the advent of the internet and email and messaging and all of the things that we know today. It's just an evolution. At its core, this is still a human crime. We're just looking at an evolution in technology. So don't get focused on the fact, don't get focused on AI. Keep your focus on the person. Keep your focus on the human. In AI, we have to keep our focus on the human. We can't remove the human side of AI. Otherwise, we're going to go down a very dangerous road. But we have to keep our focus on the individual, on the person. And just like the automobile that you rode in here today, the telephone that you have in your pocket, AI doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like everything else that we've created, there's pluses and negatives to all of these things. AI is also a tremendous tool for fighting human trafficking and crimes of exploitation. We have tools today like Darkwatch and Deja Vu AI that are revolutionizing the way that we are able to identify victims, identify perpetrators, and ultimately allow us to be much more successful. But at the end of the day, it's still about the person. It's still about the human.
Thank you so much, Doug. And that is probably one of the most important reminders that we do need for today when AI is taking over so many of the things that we do day to day. I'd love to hear more from Kim, too. I know she had gotten to share a little bit earlier, but what have you been seeing in regards to artificial intelligence? Of course, that with that human in the loop, the humans are still in control, but the AI is being used in many different facets within survivors and victims.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a little bit of a different approach. So since I'm no longer a survivor mentor on staff, I've since moved over since 2024 of being a law enforcement expert specialist. So that allows me to work with my local law enforcement agencies, U.S. Marshals, FBIs, et cetera, to be able to assist them on their cases, whether it's a human trafficking sting up or it's they're scraping the internet for ads or, things in that matter. So basically they called me in a couple years back, and this was actually before I even took my position. It's kind of what opened my position up to this because of the work I did with them. So basically they had scraped the internet. They found some leads, and so it pretty much came back as social media trafficking. And so let me dive into that just a little bit. So because of AI and social media and how our younger generation is really gearing towards that and utilizing it, this child, she had already been in a situation where she couldn't be trusted with electronics. Let's just say it for better lack of terms, right? So the parents took away the electronics, thinking that would solve the problem, that she wouldn't continue to have risky behaviors. Well, she would wait for her parents to go to bed, then she would go in the living room and she would log in on the smart television and she would get on social media that way. And unfortunately, on the other side of that was a trafficker, and he was utilizing AI. And he built a relationship with her. He built rapport with her. And he stemmed it all off of finding out what her vulnerabilities were. And one thing that he could connect with her on was she was suicidal. Well, so was I. I was Baker acted this many times. What about you? He built that rapport off of her vulnerability and then began to find other avenues of where she could be exploited at because she was a broken little girl, right? And so I had the privilege to sit with law enforcement and be able to scrape all that data, let them know, yes, no, use my lived experience, intelligence to be able to provide them with the expertise and knowledge on that to actually create a sting operation and then go in and recover this victim and pull her away. It was a whole social media AI like trafficking situation. It was really bad. And yeah, it was just really, really horrible. But that was the first big case that I actually got to work on where I saw what AI and social media is doing to our generation. And so, again, it comes back to the humans behind it. AI is not horrible, but when it's used to exploit somebody's vulnerabilities and to take advantage of them, then it does become really bad.
So much for that insight, Kim. From the additional law enforcement perspectives, Alan, what are you seeing?
Testing. There we go. Well, first of all, I want to thank Doug for calling me specifically out as being old enough to remember a corded telephone. So thank you, Doug. I appreciate it.
We're just of a similar experience.
Yeah, that's right. So and
Don't worry, there's more to come.
But it was fair. It was fair because not only do I remember a corded telephone, I also remember the party lines when more than one person had to share a telephone. So down the street. So thank you for that, Doug. I appreciate that. I looked at Kim and said, "Really?" So the other thing that I want to do right at the beginning is I want to acknowledge very clearly the true experts in this room, which are the survivors and the lived experience experts. And I see several in here that I consider to be dear friends. And of course, sitting on the stage with one, Kim, who I've known for several years, many years. And I want to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge your courage. I want to acknowledge your expertise. And I want to, look, all of us that are, many of us that are in this room look at it from the outside. You've lived it. And so I want to acknowledge your expertise and thank you for your courage. So my role with AI has been mainly in the last few years because AI has really proliferated. I'll never forget back a couple of years ago now, I was sitting, I had the opportunity to train some special operators on human trafficking, and these special operators are those ones who dress in pajamas and do things in the dark. It's scary stuff. And I had the opportunity to train with them or train them on, and they exposed me or gave me the opportunity to look at what they referred to as military-grade AI. And I didn't see all of it, but just pieces of this military-grade AI. And I will tell you that I left that experience really shaken because I thought to myself, we're in trouble. And then the statement was made that typically, and I don't know how true this is because I don't work in that space, but typically what we refer to as military-grade AI today is 3 to 4 years from becoming commercial-grade AI. And my thought was, if that's where we're at, and that's going to hit commercial grade and then consumer grade AI will then begin that process, we're really in trouble. And I was talking to Jan during the break, and I used this allegory. I said sometimes it feels, for those of us that do this work on a steady basis, it feels like that we're filling the sand pail with sand, with a little sand shovel out on the beach, where the traffickers, the buyers, the technology in particular is dumping sand by the truckloads. And we're scooping it up by the little sand shovel and trying to make progress. It seems like it's overwhelming. I really like what Doug had to say just a minute ago. He said, but what we can do is we can leverage good AI, and if it can be done for bad and for evil, why don't we look at ways to leverage that? Because we're seeing, the evil side of AI obviously makes a lot of news, right? Back in my area, we had a coach at a private school. This coach was taking pictures of the kids at his school, and then he was using nudifying apps to create nudes of these kids at his school and sharing those images. Now, his response was, well, it wasn't really their body. It's not really them. It was just their face. But do you think that I almost said a word that probably my law enforcement side coming out on. Do you think some misguided citizen, I'll try to be very, sitting behind a computer scanning for pictures of kids in the nude is going to recognize that it wasn't their body? Do you think the child who has then discovered that their body and their face is being used is going to suffer any less of a trauma because they're being exploited as being The point that I'm making is that AI has given the ability of a man who is probably in his 50s that you wouldn't think of as being someone who could even do that kind of, but we're still seeing technology in a place where the average consumer can sit down with a smartphone and create CSAM, child pornography. We've come to now, and this is me, Doug, kind of going back to how old I am now, and all my years of doing this work, I remember working what we called child abuse cases back then, child pornography cases, which now would be a CSAM case, but we were working child pornography, and the way we worked it back then was in boxes that were full of Polaroids. That was our case. We were pulling shoe boxes with Polaroid pictures out of closets, and that was how we worked those kind of. Today, they're seeing digital drives with terabytes. You're seeing thumb drives being able to hold thousands of images, and you're seeing AI with the ability to proliferate this in ways that we can't even imagine. So yes, we have this huge looming problem there that's happening. No longer is it the Polaroid boxes. Now it's the guys that are working ICAC and the detectives that are working those particular cases are having to index thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pictures that are coming off of hard drives because we're talking about it in different terms. That's that progression that we've seen, like the automobile and the telephone and into that human, and I love this, at the core of all of that is still the little girl, the little boy, the adult man, the adult woman, who still sits in darkness because they have been traumatized in ways we can't even imagine. So my goal is to do two things. Number one is to affect policy. We need policy to help us in this space because we're way behind policy. Policy is way behind technology, and we need policy. My other objective and a goal of mine is to go after buyers. Traffickers, we look at them, they're evil people. We see the victims, survivors, and we think they really need help and assistance, and we need to do all the things that we can do to support them. And I say yes, yes, yes. But what about the buyer who's now sitting online with computers. Because again, back in my day, when I first started, it was a vehicle pulling up on a sidewalk, and what we called the sidewalk or windshield window transaction, where you had the street tracks and the blades, and we still have some of those things. But the primary way of doing it now is on digital spaces. So how do we get to the buyer? Because the buyer's the one who put in that $236 billion. The buyer driving the demand. The buyer drives the market, and yet the buyer is also hiding behind misdemeanors and cloaked in anonymity. And it's time for us to go after the buyer. So we need AI, good AI, hunter AI, that can do a program and do a project and do what only AI with the bots and the things that it can do is stay on point 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never takes a vacation, never eats a meal. And it can go after these buyers who sit behind these darkened screens, and we can drive the dollars out of this market and begin to collapse human trafficking.
Thank you so much, Alan. Wow. So I think there's so many people here that you're probably thinking today, I didn't realize that this was something I can do and I can affect change. You from your seat today absolutely can. We're going to talk more. David and Mike are going to come up and show you some really cool technology that we've been working on. One of the things I did want to mention, this is new and this is hot out. We're bringing it from the UK to the US, is a program where every kid who tries to take a selfie of themselves nude, they can't. It blocks it. It green screens it. So we have that. For an amazing company called Safe to Net, we're bringing that here in the U.S. Images, videos. We also have text programs that our company Guardrail Technologies has, so that the kids can't go on and if somebody's trying to chat with them about suicide, it actually changes the chats and says, "Oh, you didn't mean that, human, did you? You didn't mean that. What you meant is this flowery thing." And we have statistics to say if someone presses an AI system 3 times, they're going to get bored and they actually move on. And so any of the negative things that we start to see, especially as parents, we can then put in control, and those devices we give our kids, we can lock these things down. So I'm so excited to hear more about what you all are doing. I'm going to trade you spots.
Trade spots, that sounds good. Excited to be here, excited to be here at Rosen, and excited to be invited to experience the fact that UCF is a very big place with a lot of different types of disciplines that can all come together. We live in one of those interdisciplinary spaces, Mike and I too, that get to see the best of UCF, the best of Rosen with hospitality technology, the best of cybersecurity, game design, simulation, which if you saw the big AI announcements and stuff from CES, the Consumer Electronics Show last week, a week and a half ago, it was all about the world is a simulation and we have a digital twin of it. How do we take the fight in this to that digital twin, using the best of the technologies and the human side of what a place like UCF and all of our partners have to offer? And that's what's been exciting to get to work on with many of you and with our other partners, and to show you what we've been asked about from the standpoint of our legislators who care very much about policy, our law enforcement, the community, the nonprofits. When we look at all the different opportunities in this area to take advantage of this, we can take advantage of all the different areas there too that we have. We live in a laboratory called the METAL Lab, the Mixed Emerging Technology Integration Lab, and METAL for short. But looking at the crossroads of these technologies, of these disciplines, seeing some of the best things that have come out of healthcare, of corporate training, of the ways that we can get to a large number of people as quickly as possible for the awareness side of this too. And then some of the best technology, like what Alan was talking about. And for us, it feels like it's years ago to look at how we take this for discovery of IEDs or bad actors out in the field for military use. A program called Combat Hunter. Sounds pretty nice, right? So go and take the fight to them. Go and have situational awareness, the same way that law enforcement needs situational awareness, and all of us. It's as simple as see something, say something in many cases. But being trained in that and understanding that, and understanding the tools that are being used against us, many of which we heard, and how we can use some of those same tools for good, and how we can change the dynamics of that too. There was a program that we got funded about 10 years ago from the National Science Foundation called I-Corps, Innovation Corps. It's sort of like Shark Tank, but with evidence. The students that get accepted into this program, they don't have to pay tuition. We pay them to take the course with their good idea, to vet out and see if their good idea has merit. One of those ideas that we had with an incredible mentor we'll hear from later too, Jan Edwards from Paving the Way, was about human trafficking, a company called Zero Trafficking that came up with this idea that's now called Dark Watch, but taking these geodatabases with some predictive analytics and some intelligence to them, and this was a few years ago, and seeing if we could make a map of where all these bad actors were, what was happening, and how to go after them. And pleased to say that, that's still, 8 or 9 years later, still going on and thriving. I was shocked because it's a 5-week program, and usually you kind of help people get through the 5-week program and understand if their idea has any merit, if someone might want to invest in it, if it's going to be something that's going to help society. Well, this team had revenue, hundreds of thousands of dollars from a DHS contract within the 3rd week of this 5-week program. Never seen anything like it before. It shows the need. It shows the idea that these tools can be turned on their head and used for good in there too. I'm going to actually switch what's here to our other. So we're pleased to be invited to a program to hear out legislators about what could UCF do with all this technology, all this community in a place that actually has a lot of problems with this too, right under our noses, and see how we could turn that on its head. And that's what this buyer beware. Florida is open for business but closed for human trafficking. I did not come up with that. It's come up with the center, so Jessica, great job. But it's been a coalition of team members that have all worked together across the university and some of our partners that have kind of put this together. So you've heard a little bit about the ideas of what the size of the problem is. You've heard some of the issues too, so I don't want to go through that as much, but I do want to understand that AI is being used in this. Anybody who understands what's going on with TikTok? It's not about the social media feed. It's not about, doing cute things and putting them online. It's about the pattern of those that control that, to be able to see that pattern and understand something you may not even understand about yourself. It is psychological warfare at its worst. And when you look at that side of it, you want to know who's in control of it. And you want that to be you, if it's something you want to use. Those are the types of things that are at stake and at issue. Because if you see a certain pattern, if a trafficker sees a certain pattern, they know what to go after. They know that weak point, like what you were saying there, Kim. Those are the types of things that we need to have ways to combat that. And we also need to, when we see those patterns and we see those people, be able to have predictive analytics to go and take that fight to them early, before it even gets to this point. Alan talked about some of the different elements of this, the victim, the trafficker, the buyer, and we want to establish a national model for this that can be used other places. UCF is a great place to do this with so many different NGOs and different leadership in the area, and of course the Institute. Our Institute for Simulation and Training has this history, and I talked about it a little bit too, but things like the Combat Hunter program and a book, it's a famous book, so I'm going to say the title, but please don't take anything of this. It's a book called Left to Bang. It's about how do you get ahead of something like an IED exploding, and how do you see all those signs before it happens, and take that fight to them through these Combat Hunter techniques. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, saw this and said, hey, this is at a public university. We don't have to pay for this again. We can pay to make a couple changes to it, change the logos and stuff, and came up with the SIGNS program, Situational Intelligence Gathering Network. This is what ICE and Customs and Border Patrol go to Glencoe, Georgia, FLETC, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, to get trained in these techniques. This is something we built at UCF and deployed both in the Marine Corps and also with DHS, Department of Homeland Security. These are some of the techniques that are being used to train law enforcement in see something, say something, and also can be used by all of us. We wanted to take that and take it a step further. working with Electronic Crimes Task Force that's organized by the Secret Service, working with community members. During the same time, a number of things just all kind of converged together. Got invited by Generosity New York to come up and hear about and talk about some of the different groups like Institute for Justice, Love 146, and then seeing some of the organizations down here like Pave the Way and others that are doing great work, and all that kind of coming together. Local, state, national, even international, all coming together. Fast forward a little bit and we start to see these AI tools coming on board. We get asked by Navy and other groups to put together something around an AI Avengers. How could you hear a single gunshot in 20,000 hours of video or see the flash? Those are the types of things that AI is great at that takes humans a long time to do. What if we could do that for seeing those small patterns of grooming, small patterns of activity, small patterns of risky behavior that you want to be able to address? That's where things like zero trafficking and some of the different tools started to come together and all culminate for how we might take this fight in 3 steps. Those 3 steps are to produce a firewall. When you start to get to those sites, if someone's a buyer, you're going to let them know, you're about to do this in our state, and you're not going to do this in our state. And if you do, here's the consequences. Those are the types of things that if you can give those messages to people before, maybe they'll stop. The second is to make sure that law enforcement on the ground, understanding what the true needs are. Dr. Arthur Wong has come up with some great techniques for how you'd combine all these different databases that you have to go to, all these different, digital shoeboxes, let's say, of potential evidence or patterns that you'd have, all these different databases, and put them together in one easy-to-use app, everything combined, so you don't have go to this database, this database, this database. It's all in one data lake or one big opportunity to fuse that data. I got to see some of this in action last year's CES in Las Vegas. Sheriff Kevin McHale gave us an opportunity, some of the analysts, to hear about some of the technologies. So we're also known at UCF for things like computer vision. Anybody know what that is? Where a camera can be smart. It can know what it's seeing using AI. So this computer vision and mapping these cameras together, there's something called Flock AI. It's a flock of cameras all over Las Vegas and other places too have this. The ability to go and see things like, to go and have one camera communicate with another camera and be able to track something like a kidnapper. There was a baby that was stolen, kidnapped, and within just a few hours, using these Flock cameras, they're able to recover. What if we could use those same technologies to help recover young women, young men, other people that might be in a trafficking situation? Those are the types of things that we want to take the fight to them. The last part goes back to that combat hunter model. What if we had an AI hunter bot that never slept, never ate, never drank? This model that you see here, that logo, was actually designed by AI, for the hunter bot. So, but trying to look at some of the best techniques and technologies that could be used to take that fight, those geographic maps, the ability to pass information across jurisdictions, some of the things that you don't think about as civilians, but that law enforcement is going to want and need as their tools. But also to keep it very human and very approachable from the standpoint of how is this tool used and how is it used for this human problem with people in law enforcement, good caring people in nonprofits, good caring people at our university, all coming together for this. I'm going to turn over to Mike to talk a little bit more about some of the details on this too.
Yes, I'll talk briefly. So I work in David's lab, and we have a team of about 13 mixed of students and professionals that work on projects like this. So our responsibility from the tech side of things is to serve the mission. So we work with the subject matter experts. We identify the problem. We identify what are the appropriate technologies to use, how to responsibly implement those to tackle something like this. So that proactive side of this. So the restless AI, that it can go after this regardless. So being able to tap into the databases, have those things intelligently connected based on a team of sort of an agentic, so multiple AIs working together to be able to target these activities, and then connect those via things like our SHIELD app, right? This super app of apps, if you will, to support law enforcement to be able to target and go after the buyers follow the money. These are the types of tools we want to put into their hands to be able to target. In that circle here, these are some of the sort of the low-hanging fruit, if you will, of the different places that the buyers frequent and how those sort of connect that triangle of the anti-human trafficking. That first part that we mentioned, the firewall, right? This is something that is that preventative. So these are the warnings. These are the cross-traffic behavior going from site to site, the ads. This is the spot of intervention for the buyer, warning them of the consequences. It gives an additional data point for us to be able to, again, also track that behavior, the activity that then feeds into things like the hunter bots and the databases that would go through the Shield app. So we've got that three-layered approach that we'll be able to target using various LLMs and models. So a lot of what my team does is we stay on the cutting edge of what those are. So every day we have, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this? And it's really, trying to keep up with this small, army of technologists to be able to feed through there. Oh, thank you. So yeah, that's for our responsibility. That's what we work with our subject matter experts here at Rosen College, Alan, Kim, others that basically help us build this in a way that is going to be the most beneficial, respecting privacy, all of the things that we've now associated with AI and the positives and negatives. But we are that honest broker of technology to be able to find the right tool for the right job. So, anything else?
Yeah, anything additional you want to?
Anything I missed you want to cover? Good.
So I wanted to make sure we had enough time to ask questions, because I'm sure you have many. I have a lot myself. But we'll go ahead, let's see. Actually, can I hand this microphone over? So we'd love to take, go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question.
Last row.
Get your track shoes on.
Hi. So my question is, this is all wonderful information, and I usually get questions on what parents can do and how do they get access to this information. So how can people get access to this information? Are there newsletters? What is being done so that way parents know how to get these kinds of apps and stuff on their kids' phones?
So there are new groups that are out there trying to push this information. Social media is the best place. So many companies like mine, and I know others, are trying to get out to the entire first off school system to say we can put the blockers in place to make sure your kids are safe while at school. And they're not connecting with AI in a way that they shouldn't. Those are definitely a lot of it is organic. We are coming out, at least my company is, with a parents guide program. We'll have that out for the next school year. So unfortunately, it's going to take us a few months to write that. We've got a bunch of professors currently in the mix doing that. But that is a wonderful question. We need your help. This information, if you tell 10 people today, that is going to help spark, hopefully, this revolution to help protect others. We did not do a great job when the internet came out. I remember having my 2-year-old on everything. YouTube, it all. My kids were digital natives. They still are. And so we have an opportunity today with AI to take back control. It's gotten out of control a little bit. We need to grab it back because it is an amazing, as you heard, invention for the future.
Huge awareness campaigns going on, especially this month too. I don't know how many of you have traveled here and stuff too, but in the airports, airport bathrooms, you see something, say something signs. You hear about the major airlines all having training programs for flight attendants. Someone that would easily see some of this. Nurses in hospitals. A lot of our hospitals around here have talked about some of their programs too. There's still a lot more to be done. And I know this afternoon we're going to hear more about that. And I think that tees you up. You have a mic.
I do. Thank you, David. Good morning, y'all. So, by the way, I'm the Jan Edwards they keep referencing. So, to actually have multiple questions. First of all, and this is, I think, mainly to you, right? Yay, I love this. There's a lot of people working in this space. Earlier, both the mayor and the SAO talked about collaboration. In this space, we keep siloing, and that cannot happen any longer. Just like people try to divide our country, people try to divide each other. Collaboration is everything. So I'm begging you to collaborate with two organizations that I know are already way ahead of this. One is Bark. Bark is in schools. They're designing a phone. They've got a little mobile app. They're doing all kinds of really cool things. They're extraordinary in this space. And they've really, by the way, whoever asked the parent question, go to bark.us. They've got some extraordinary tools for parents to really understand emojis. Two is Gaggle. Gaggle is already in the schools, right? They're already doing the firewall stuff. They've already prevented several self-harm incidents, right? So with that preface, how are you different than either of those organizations? And I have one more question.
All working together. We have a little different of a tactic where we're sitting in the network itself and some other avenues that we've been going in through. So I love what they're absolutely doing. The avenues that we've gone in through are some of the massive government contracts, which does take us in a little different of direction. We're sitting right between the human and the technology, and so yes, very collaborative and supportive with those technologies. We're just doing it in a bit different of a way. And so honestly, the multiple layers that you can have to protect the kids, it's not going to be one layer. We need multiple layers. So
yeah, agreed. Second question. I think this is really for Alan and Doug. How are you going to partner with and work with, there's already several people out there educating law enforcement, right? Partner up with them to make sure they get this tool, much like the tool that Tim Estes created with Thorn, right? If you remember taking the picture of the hotel room, because it seems like that's the really important piece here, is having law enforcement have access to this. And so can you share a little bit about how you're going to develop those relationships over time, and who you're actually going to start partnering with, because this is imperative. Lives are at stake. We see it every day with kids. And it's super cool, by the way. Like, I'm really excited about this. I didn't want to kind of come off whatever. But so just really law enforcement, because that's a important piece of this.
So from my perspective, partnering with public institutions that are creating things like this are critical. Collaborating, right? You know I love that word. Are absolutely essential. There are a lot of tools that are out there, but often very difficult to get into the hands of law enforcement, whether it's federal, special federal, or even state law enforcement, because in the federal government, there's a FedRAMP process that is incredibly expensive, and it's long, and by the time you do get a piece of technology in for use, it's 3 years old, and you're already behind the curve. But we can short circuit a lot of that if we work with public institutions, right? And there is a way, even on some of the for-profit technology, I think, there is a way to offset some of that cost with investment through private equity, which is something that we're starting to look at as a way to make these tools more widely available to law enforcement and even some nonprofits, just to kind of help buy down that cost.
And from my perspective, too, ditto to what Doug just said, I think the public institution such as UCF, the work it's doing, kind of creates this this Sweden, this neutral place where there's not the infighting that sometimes happens within the space. So I think collaboration is kind of an easier sell. But I will also say that a lot of what we're talking about, and David represented it, I mentioned it just a minute ago, came out of a legislative working group, a legislative group that assembled in Tallahassee, in which UCF was a big part of that. But every department within Florida was at that meeting. The AG's office, the governor's office, and legislators were sitting there both on the Senate and the House side. And this idea really kind of born out of that. So I think one of the things that sometimes we miss when it comes to law enforcement, because law enforcement, at least in my experience, is siloed just like everybody else. We don't even talk to each other. And feds don't talk to the locals very well. Local don't talk to state sometimes. And so there's that. And that's really to the detriment of everyone. That's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. But using the power of legislation, the funding streams that come out of Tallahassee. So from Florida itself, having the legislature as kind of the birthplace of this idea, I think will really go a long way toward really bringing in the law enforcement community to that.
And just to follow up on what Alan was saying, I'm not a big fan of the grant process because we keep shooting ourselves in the foot with it. It encourages siloing. The way that the grant process is, especially federal grants, there are a limited number of federal institutions that give grants, and there's a finite amount of money. There are a number of institutions that are out there that want that grant money. And so it creates, it doesn't foster collaboration, it fosters competition between organizations because everybody wants a piece of that money. And so it's cutthroat. When instead, to me, if I was the guy writing the rules, I would say, if you're going to get a federal grant, and if you're a public institution and you want a research grant, collaboration with another organization, with another institution would be mandatory. Because you've got, I mean, look at the talent here at UCF and some of the specializations. And we have a research center that specializes in the intersection of human trafficking and the hospitality industry. No other institution in the United States has that. You have Pepperdine University, who has a research institute that focuses strictly on the legislative and policy implications of human trafficking. You've got the University of Southern Mississippi that focuses on, their human trafficking research institute focuses on survivor care. You've got the University of Houston that focuses on technology, particularly as it relates to borders, trade, and immigration. You've got the University of Toledo that focuses on best practices, identifying best practices. So you've got all of these institutions that have these niche things. They're all competing for research money, but don't you think that if they collaborated, they could make their products, they could make their outcomes that much better instead of trying to rely or trying to build something internally in which they don't have a specialization on?
I'm going to say something on this too, because it's absolutely true. But I am seeing some glimmers of hope too in some different models. Some of those models come from things like we were talking about Shark Tank earlier too. You know, best ideas get up there, best ideas win. And that's the competition part. But then what if in these prize challenges, which the government's starting to run, challenge.gov and prize challenges, you start to convene people together. You start to see, okay, well, USF has a great database up the street. Let's reach out and talk about that. Let's not reinvent the wheel, 80 miles down the road and do something that's similar or that's already been done. Let's use that's a state money funded thing. Let's use state money efficiently. Federal money as well too. And I think, with DOGE, I think that's the era that we're living in too. We're going to see more of that collaboration, that outreach. But that is starting to happen. It's starting to be encouraged by some of these grants and programs, especially the ones that encourage community outreach, working with nonprofits, bringing and convening those for-profits together that wouldn't normally work together. But if there's a common goal, a shared ideal, then maybe they do. And that's maybe the spirit of what we're looking for now, that hopefully will be what we see going into the future, especially around large-scale, massive social problems like this that can't be fixed by any one university, no matter how big, any one government, no matter how big. What happens when they go back to Guatemala or the Philippines? Oh, that's somebody else's problem now. Ship it to Interpol. Well, it's still everybody's problem, and it's still a problem that came here, and it's going to come right back, too. Those are the types of interjurisdictional things that if you can leverage something that knows policy, can automate policy, can speed up work processes, can speed up all the paperwork and documentation, the back office of what AI can do is probably even more powerful than the front-end fight of what it can do. So hopefully those will be things that we see as well, too. Those are problems for another day that other people are addressing, but those are things that you're going to see in terms of efficiency. And that efficiency might be every bit as important as the frontline fight of education, of outreach, of taking the fight to them.
Hi. I'm just curious, with the using of the AI technology, I know it's going after bad people doing bad things, but have you come across like unique ethical problems with using AI technology and like everyone's concerned, with right to privacy and all of those, and identifying patterns that aren't necessarily what you're looking for but can lead to other problems? So what ethical issues have you discovered, and how are you working with that?
Yeah, we've been looking at this, especially on the firewall, because what if you start blocking everybody from everything, and it's your opinion versus something else that's rule of law or fact? Those are the types of things that we want to avoid, too. So having collaborators that are coming from the most prominent sites, like a travel site, for instance, come to Orlando, and if that travel site buys in to the idea that that's not something they want to happen from their site, then you start to establish that network and coordination of that too, where everybody who's involved is opted in. They've bought into that too. That's probably how it's going to have to happen, rather than some wide sweeping, just use the technology to block everybody of everything too. That's not freedom. That's not what we exist for. So that's probably the hard problem. And that's where we're having some of our students in a senior design class look at too. Look at it from all angles to make sure that we are addressing and keeping privacy, keeping right to speech, until someone gets to where they're violating a law or violating someone else's rights. And then, of course, I think we could all agree that, well, that's what law enforcement is. That's what laws are for. And that's where that stops. And that's where we stop it at too, not in people's personal freedoms too. So we are very concerned about that. And that's one of probably the hardest things to do right, is that, but it comes through buy-in, it comes through coordination, collaboration with these groups, not just turning a switch on the technology and everybody gets cut off. That's the nuance of the TikTok problem too, if we want to look at it that way too. But I wanted to make sure and state the negatives that are predatory and make sure everybody understands that, because oftentimes people only see the good in that from privacy and freedom of speech to side. They don't see the dark underbelly.
Yeah, and just to parallel with David, and I know we're out of time, so I'll keep this brief, but from a law enforcement perspective, one of the things that AI is allowing us to do is like predictive policing and some things of that nature, which can really start straying out in some areas that are not good. So while the bad guy is not necessarily constrained, the bad actor is not constrained by morals or the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, none of those things. He doesn't care. She doesn't care. They're just out there playing in this dark world. But that does constrain us in this civilized side. So law enforcement, when you start looking at things like predictive policing and things of that nature, still has to be aware, and very much so in that ethical side of application, so that the First and the Fourth and the Fifth and the 14th Amendment, all those things that we consider to be valuable and core into what we're doing in society is ethically observed as well. So some people would say that puts a little bit of a restraint on us, but I would say that it's what makes us who we are. And so having that ethical conversation and making sure it's there. So great question. Thank you for that.
Well, and I think the last thing that I would say in regards to policy creation is we can take lessons from other countries. So in regards to the UK, they've got a massive problem right now where they're looking at it, trying to do the best for their citizens. Well, one of the laws that they have is no communication can be shut between two individuals. That means that we cannot block communication from a trafficker to a child. that is a massive problem. So, sometimes the good can become the bad. And so AI can definitely help with looking at those policies to say, here's all the outcomes that can occur, and hopefully helping us to create better programs going forward. So thank you to all the panelists today. Amazing, and thank you for having us.
Anybody got one for me? Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Thank you. Listen, you guys, thank you, Shauna. You guys give a round of applause for Shauna, okay? Come on through. You got a microphone? And then for our panelists, these are experts that literally gave their time to come here today and talk to you guys. How many of you think you might have learned something this morning? Yes. Take that knowledge and share with a friend. Tomas told me just now, make sure we're live streaming these sessions today, and this one included. It's on our YouTube channel at hospitality.ucf.edu, or you can just do @Rosen College on YouTube and hit the live stream. Share it with people so that they can learn as well. It's really important. So I want to thank you all, my friends, for coming here today and giving us a conversation. So thank them again, please, everybody. Thank you. We have now, you're going to have a short break between programming. All my students, this is a little bit of a housekeeping, but you'll have an assignment that goes along with this session. Please visit your web courses and be honest with it. That helps us evaluate what you're learning. At 12 o'clock, everybody please meet us in the student lounge at the new center stage. We're going to hear from another lived experience expert. We're also going to hear from some advocates, and then we're going to have our Knights of the Realm student organization talk to you all. These are our students that advance all anti-trafficking efforts for the college. And then we're going to have lunch. Lunch will be at 12:30 in the student lounge. Outside of the lounge, you're going to see some tables there. These are our community advocates. One More Child, Paving the Way Foundation, Flight Center, Victim Services. Please stop by and say hello to them. Get involved. See how you can volunteer so that you can now be part of our army of abolitionists. Sound good? Yes. Tomas?
So everyone on streaming, please share the links. We sent you all the links this morning with friends for the afternoon session. I believe it starts at 1:30.
1:30.
Please share it with everybody. We have the Red Sand event happening next.
Yeah. So the red sand, you guys, like I said, is going to happen in the center stage, and then we'll go outside and pour sand. I realize you probably have no idea what Red Sand Project is. It's an art installation that we use red sand to pour into the cracks of the sidewalks as a art installation showing how survivors of human trafficking slip through the cracks of the societal and political aspects in our community. Together, by pouring the red sand, we can shed light on survivors of human trafficking. So you guys, we'll go pour some sand together as well. Sound good? All right. Go be awesome. See you soon.
We're going to do a picture so the photographers could come. We want to do a picture with this panel.
Sounds good. We'll get into the panel. That was great, guys. Yeah. So good. Come on in. We'll close.